Wilson, Blackstone Group. It's a private equity firm based in New York. He's a billionaire as well. Then Robert Rubin and Carla Hills took over as co-chairman of the board. Robert Rubin's worth almost $1 billion, and Carla Hills, I'm not sure how much she's worth, but she's got plenty. I'm sure she's over enough to be a capitalist. Now, of course, when we talk about the capitalist class, we're talking about people that don't have to work for a living. They can remain motionless, and because they have a lot of assets, the money flows in like an avalanche. And that's what the Council on Foreign Relations leadership, that's typical of the leadership. They don't have to go out and get a job like the rest of us. You know, sell your skin for money. They don't have to do that because they have so many assets. They just, have lots of free time if they want. And they oftentimes get a job. They run their own family firms. David Rockefeller was the chairman of the Chase Manhattan Bank and Wall Street again. So anyway, 9 out of the 10 top leaders were all capitalist class people associated with the banks in New York, private equity firms in New York, Wall Street. And the other one was an advisor to David Rockefeller. He was the vice chairman of the council for a while. Solomon is his name. He was advisor to David Rockefeller and was worked for the Rockefeller family. So he was associated with very closely. A big house in New York that they have, big meeting room space, and speak to the council members and answer questions. So they'll have everybody, anyone. And if you look at the old annual reports on the website, you can see pictures of all these important world leaders. You name the world leader, they've been to the Council on Foreign Relations to talk. They even had, interestingly enough, Fidel Castro came to talk to the Council on Foreign Relations in 1959 when he came to the UN to speak at the UN. The Council on Foreign Relations asked him to come to speak to the Council on Foreign Relations. They wanted to find out, at that point, Fidel was a secret Marxist, he was a revolutionary, but he wasn't saying, somebody that can get, so they hire Kissinger Associates, who knows all about this stuff, and Henry Kissinger can call up the Prime Minister of India, Modi, say, hey Modi, we want a railroad, one for cheap. I'm exaggerating a little bit to make the point, but that's how these deals are made, People like that connect. So Kissinger Associates is a private organization that gets money from big corporations, and lots of money. Kissinger's become a multi-millionaire, to advise corporations on strategic investments, planning for their overseas expansion. So that's just one. There's a whole bunch of others. Condoleezza Rice is another interesting example. And this gets to the council becoming a multicultural organization and a multiracial organization. And I'll get to the council's history in a little while, but the Council on Foreign Relations, when it was founded in the First World War period, all the way till 1970, it was men only, males only till 1970, no women allowed. And the council people would say, the men would say, if we let women in, we'll have to let our wives in. We don't want to do that. We want to get away from our wives. So, but the 60s, and of course the Rockefeller family has been very prominent in the Bilderbergers, and they're very heavily interlocked with the Council on Foreign Relations. They meet once a year to discuss world events, world activities, and that's one of the important council international organizations. But in the Europe, it started in Europe, and a large portion of their active members are European, and there's so many of them are nobles that's amazing that hasn't been mentioned in any of the books that I read. I just started noticing myself, wait a minute, these are mostly nobles, European nobles on the European side of it. Then there's the Trilateral Commission, which was founded by Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller in 1974. That Rockefeller and Brzezinski were thinking, Japan and Europe are becoming more powerful. U.S. domination, in order to maintain U.S. domination, we have to ally ourselves more closely with Europe and Japan and coordinate more closely. So they formed the Trilateral Commission, and that was another organization that worked like the Council on Foreign Relations. They had think tank type of study groups, and then they would publish reports. An early report got them into trouble because they said It was authored by Samuel P. Huntington of Harvard was one of the authors. They had usually three authors, one Japanese, one European, one from the United States or Canada. Those were the trilateral, the three parts that they were talking about. One of them, that report got the Trilateral Commission into trouble being in the war, but they want to plan the New World Order after the war and U.S. war aims. And they're meeting with the State Department to get stamp of approval. And of course the State Department says, yeah, that would be great. Do some planning, start some plans. We don't have the personnel, we're cut back. We don't have that much, it's a depression, we don't have any staff. So the council goes to the Rockefeller Foundation and asks for some money for this. How much do they get? $300,000 in 1939. That's a lot of money in 1939. That's like, I don't know, 300 million now. I don't know how much it is, but it's a vast amount of money for 1939. So they start getting together some study groups to plan for the post-war world and for the U.S. war aims as well. The economic and financial group, the territorial group, the political group, the armaments group, and then later the peace aims group. And the peace aims group was not U.S. war aims because that was the other groups. We're all looking at that. The peace aims group were what are the war aims for France, Britain, Germany, etc., other countries that were in the war. So the peace aims was talking about those countries. That was the peace aims. So this was called the War and Peace Studies of the Council on Foreign Relations. And that's how I got interested in this topic myself, because when I was a graduate student, I was looking for a dissertation topic to set the framework for discussion, debate, consensus, decision-making about the importance of Persian Gulf oil. Now at that time, fracking was not on the scene, and U.S. oil wells were declining very sharply. Fracking only came after the Iraq War. But so U.S. oil declined. Meantime, the main sources of world oil are in the Middle East. Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. That's 60% of the oil of the world. So they begin to say that, we've got to make sure those sources of oil are in our hands. And at the same time, China's rising, Japan's rising, Europe is rising, becoming more powerful. U.S. hegemony is declining because these other countries are developing their economies, partly under U.S. auspices. The world setup that they set up after World War II allowed these countries to develop. So U.S. hegemony is declining. So how do we maintain U.S. hegemony? The oil. Japan needs the oil. They don't have oil. China, they need the oil. Europe, they need the oil. What if we get the oil? Then they need us, don't they? And who has a lot of oil? Let's see. Saudi Arabia, but they're already our friends. Iraq is the second biggest pot of oil in the world. Although now some people say Venezuela. But anyway, this time they said Iraq, second biggest source of oil in the world. And it's really cheap. It's just under the desert sand. You just drill a few feet and the oil comes out. And you sell it for vast amounts of money. It costs $1 or $2 to get the oil, and you sell it for lots more, for varying prices. Prices go up and down for the oil, of course. So they say, yes, this sounds like a good idea. So the council begins to set the framework for the U.S. to take over Iraq. And they're even did an organization, the Project for a New American Century, it was called, who recommended to Bill Clinton in the 1990s, the president at the time. And of course the Clinton administration was very heavy in the CFR. Bill Clinton himself was a member of the CFR. His daughter later became a member of the CFR. But interestingly enough, Hillary's never become a member of the CFR. She speaks there all the time. She was like there 10 different times to speak to the council, but she never became a member. But Bill became a member in the 1980s. That was important in him becoming president. Anyway, they recommended this Project for a New American Century, which was a lot of the right-wing people of the CFR, the more conservative, nationalistic elements of the CFR were in the Project for the New American Century. People like Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Cheney, Dick Cheney, who later became vice president under W. Bush. people like that, a number of others, some of whom have been supporting Trump now. Some of those Project for New American Century people support Trump. So anyways, they were very aggressive. They wrote a letter to, and signed all these Council on Foreign Relations people, to Bill Clinton. And like I said, it was the right wing of the council. It wasn't necessarily all the council, but it was a certain segment. They wrote a letter to Clinton, we got to take over Iraq. Saddam Hussein's a dictator, he's dangerous, we got to take it over, and anyway, we'll get some oil on it. So how about war there? So Clinton just kind of ignored that. But then when Bush came in, Bush was closely tied to a lot of these people. He put Wolfowitz in as his Assistant Secretary of Defense, and other council people like Condoleezza Rice, council person, became the National Security Advisor. Powell, another council